So, greetings, sisters and brothers. My name is the Reverend Vernon K. Walker from the Pentecostal Tabernacle Church in Cambridge. We are here to talk about the Safe Communities Act. We're glad to have so many of you here with us. You all are welcome to listen, but please remember that this is an event for the press. Only members of the press who signed in and identified their media organization will be allowed to ask questions. So at this particular juncture, I would like to bring up Amy Grunder, who's the Director of the Legislative Affairs of the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugees Advocacy Coalition. So let's welcome her as she comes.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Am I in the right place against this mic? So yes, my name is Amy Grunder, and I do direct legislative affairs for MIRA. My executive director was to be here today, but she's traveling out of the country, so she couldn't be here with us now. So I'm representing her and our organization. MIRA is the largest coalition in New England advocating for immigrants and refugees. We're also leaders in the Safe Communities Coalition, many of whose members are here to testify today. This bill is our top priority because immigrant families are in crisis, and we need, as a Commonwealth, to step up to support them. Over the past 3 years, as many of you have watched, immigrants have faced a torrent of hostile federal policies and rhetoric. Aggressive immigration enforcement has become the norm, destabilizing families and entire communities. What's more, the federal government is trying to use our local police, sheriffs, and our courts to help find and deport immigrant state residents. And when immigrants see police and courts involved in deportations, they stop reporting crimes. They don't seek help in an emergency. They may not even go to the hospital because they're afraid that somehow they or a family member will be reported to ICE and deported. This undermines public safety and public health for all of us. You don't need to take my word for it. Today you'll hear testimony from the front lines, including immigrant survivors of domestic violence and their advocates. You'll hear from doctors, social workers, legal service providers, and a host of immigrant organizations. The Safe Communities Act would restore confidence in our public institutions by drawing a clear line between law enforcement and civil immigration matters. All 4 of its provisions have been tested in cities and towns across Massachusetts and across our country with the support of law enforcement. To sum up the provisions, first, the bill ensures that police and court officials don't question people about immigration status because of the chilling effect this has on seeking help. The Massachusetts State Police and many police departments in Massachusetts already have similar policies. Second, the bill guarantees basic due process. Before ICE questions someone in local custody, police would need to advise them that it's an immigration interview and that they have the right to contact their own attorney, just like a Miranda warning, but in the civil context. Third, it allows law enforcement to notify ICE of a person's release from custody only after serving a sentence, not before they've had their day in court. This preserves access to justice for defendants and victims alike. Finally, the bill would end 287G agreements that deputize local law enforcement as immigration agents at state and local expense. We are the only state, Massachusetts is the only state in New England with such agreements, and we have 4. We need to allow our police and court officials to focus on public safety, and we need to send a powerful message to our immigrant communities that in Massachusetts, our police protect everyone, no matter where they come from or no matter how they got here. Thank you.
I want to mention that we need to pass the Safe Communities Act. No one should have to live in fear, and everyone's civil rights should be respected. The Safe Communities Act would help restore immigrant residents' trust in the police. They need to know that the police will not ask questions about their immigration status if they seek help, and their due process rights will be protected. And that's essentially why we are here, to stand in solidarity with our immigrant brothers and sisters so they can feel safe in their communities. Next up, I'd like to call Tom O'Brien, who will provide a business perspective the managing partner of the HYM Investment Group. So we'd like to welcome you to come on up. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name again is Tom O'Brien, and the name of our company is the HYM Investment Group. We're a Boston-based real estate company that works on some of the largest, more complicated development projects in the city of Boston and the city of Cambridge. You may know us as people who work on the redevelopment of Suffolk Downs in East Boston, or Bullfinch Crossing at the base of the hill here, the redevelopment of the Government Center Garage. We're also people who did the work to redevelop the North Point in Cambridge and East Cambridge, Boston Landing in Brighton, which includes the Boston Bruins practice facility. So I'm here, as the Reverend said, as an employer and a business leader, because companies like ours, like HYM, and the many contractors, subcontractors, and partners with whom we work, we depend on a strong labor force in Massachusetts in which 1 in 5 workers is an immigrant. That's a key important piece for us to remember. These people are architects, they're engineers, they're machine operators, they're truck drivers, they're carpenters, they're masons. These are skilled people. Because immigration law is so incredibly complex, the conditions are particularly difficult right now. Many of our immigrant workers live in fear, even if they have green cards or U.S. citizenship, because some of their loved ones are perhaps not so fortunate. This is why in 2018, myself and a group of people co-founded something called the Massachusetts Business Immigration Coalition, MBIC. We've now grown to include 75 different business leaders and associations, and several of our MBIC members will be testifying today. We're very proud to be here as business leaders to stand with this group of activists to support the Safe Communities Act. I urge this bill to pass for 3 reasons. First, and this is an important business piece, Massachusetts' reputation as a diverse and inclusive place is central to our economic competitiveness. We attract talent from all over the world because immigrants have long felt welcome here. Passing the Safe Communities Act would reinforce this message. Second, the fear that has taken hold in immigrant communities makes it easy for unscrupulous employers to mistreat and take advantage of workers. We take pride in doing right by our employees, and we want all workers in Massachusetts to be safe and well treated on the job. Third, and this one is personal to me, because I have the privilege of having 5 wonderful children whom my wife and I have adopted from 5 different countries outside of the U.S. I believe this is a matter of right and wrong. Our values demand that we treat everyone with dignity and respect, no matter where they come from. But in the current political climate, some people feel that they can decide at a glance who does or does not belong here, and that's wrong. The Safe Communities Act, passing the Safe Communities Act says that in Massachusetts, we won't stand for that. We're not okay with anyone living in our communities living in fear. And we're not okay with public safety resources being used to separate families. We all know that federal immigration policies are broken and in need of reform, but we don't have to wait for Congress to make things better here in Massachusetts. As a business leader, as a concerned citizen, as a father, I urge you all to work hard to report this bill out favorably today and to seek its passage. Thank you very much.
It is time for our state government to act with moral courage and make the entire state a safe community for immigrants. Am I right about it? Next up, we want to call Damaris Vasquella, Program Director of Alpha. And if I got it wrong, please
No
correct
worries,
me.
that's okay.
All right.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Good morning. And yes, I'm Damaris Velasquez. I'm the Director of Programs of Agencia Alpha. But I'm also, Agencia Alpha is a member of the Steering Committee of the Safe Communities Act, a diverse statewide coalition with a strong representation of directly impacted communities. The Safe Communities Act will draw a clear line between state and local law enforcement and civil immigration matters to protect everyone's basic rights and ensure that fear of deportation doesn't keep anyone from seeking help when they need it. Let me give you an example. In Agencia Alpha, we deal with immigration issues constantly. We have a legalization program where we help about 1,000 cases a year, so we know how our community feels. We had the case of Rosa, an undocumented woman from Guatemala, who one day was walking with her 6-year-old child from school, and the child was telling her everything that was going on that day in his school. He is 6 years old. All of a sudden, they see a police officer walking on the other side of the street. He pulls her quietly and whispers, "Mama, stop speaking in Spanish, because he might stop you and deport you." This is a 6-year-old child who already knows the danger of being and sounding different. A 6-year-old child who already knows that he cannot trust a local police officer. It is time to base our laws on human needs and human rights instead of following blindly the legacy of phobia and racism in our society. It is time for Massachusetts to send a message. We want to be different. We want to be different than the rest of our country. Passing this bill will send a message that in Massachusetts, law enforcement is here to protect us all, no matter where we were born. Thank you.
Next up, I'd like to call our legislative support, and who have been and folks who have been championing this inside of the State House here, or some of the folks who have been championing this inside the State House. So I'd like to call Representative Ruth Balzer up, and I'd like to call Senator Jamie Eldridge up at the same time for them to address. Let's welcome them as they come.
Well, we're very proud to have filed the Safe Communities Act, and we are looking forward to the hearing today before the Joint Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security. People from all over Massachusetts are flooding into the building, even as we speak, to urge our legislature to support the Safe Communities Act. The committee is going to hear today from victims and witnesses of crime who have been afraid to contact the police for help for fear that someone might ask a question about someone's immigration status. We're going to hear from healthcare providers who are going to testify to the fact that there are parents who won't bring their children for needed medical care out of fear that someone will ask a question about someone's immigration status. And we're going to hear from leaders of business who are going to talk about the stress on their workforce because of the fear that someone will ask questions about immigration status. The Safe Communities Act could make a statement that Massachusetts is a safe and welcoming place for immigrants and refugees. And I would just like to add a personal note that my decision to be the lead House sponsor on this bill is informed in large measure by my being a Jewish American who has the historical memory of the doors of this country being closed in the 1920s and 1930s when Europe's Jews needed a safe place to go. I was brought up with a simple message: never again. And I know I understand that the state legislature cannot fix national immigration policy, but there are steps we can take as a state to make it clear that this state is a safe and welcoming place for immigrants and refugees, because that's who Massachusetts is. Thank you.
I'm State Senator Jamie Eldridge, and I am so proud to file the Safe Communities Act with Representative Ruth Balzer and Representative Liz Miranda. And I want to thank the MIRA Coalition and the Safe Communities Act Coalition members for all their amazing organizing already over the past year on getting this bill before the governor. The formal name of the bill is an act to protect the civil rights and safety of all Massachusetts residents. And I thought about that this past Sunday when I went to visit constituents where the husband and father had been deported back to Brazil about 2 years ago. And when I sat across the kitchen table from those two young children, and I sat across the kitchen table from that wife, I did not see civil rights protections. I did not see public safety. I saw fear in their eyes and their expressions. And when we're talking about civil rights, we're talking about a basic sense of belonging in a society, a basic sense of belonging in a commonwealth. When we're talking about public safety, it's about making sure you don't have to worry about being swept off the street with no notice by ICE agents. That is what's happening right now in Massachusetts and all across the country due to the Trump administration. And so what this legislation will do is restore some of those basic rights that we hold so integral here in Massachusetts, that sense of public safety, but not just for undocumented immigrants and not just for immigrant families, for every single resident in Massachusetts. Because the sense of fear I saw in that family that I saw on Sunday affected not just that family and their loved ones and friends, it affected that neighborhood, it affected that city, it affected the whole Commonwealth. As Representative Ruth Balzer said, there is not much we can do to stop the Trump administration's mass deportation agenda. But we're here in Massachusetts. We stand for Massachusetts values of tolerance, of being a welcoming state, of celebrating our diversity. And unfortunately, right now we have law enforcement, court officials, taxpayer dollars, unintentionally or not, aiding and abetting with ICE agents in that mass deportation agenda. We can stop that invoking of Massachusetts values and contributing to those deportations by passing the Safe Communities Act. Let's get that done. I look forward to a very powerful hearing today. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I apologize for my tardiness. I broke my foot. But I couldn't miss today. As a young woman from a mixed status family and a community that like the Fifth Suffolk that is over 50% foreign born, we know that immigration is a matter of life and death for most families. So we're not just doing this just because we want to pass laws, but we want to save lives and keep families together. And so I'm really proud of everyone that's been working on this for a very long time and know that we will get it passed this year. Thank you so much.
If our police get involved in immigration matters, it is likely that black and brown immigrants in Massachusetts will be most affected. Because the criminal justice system is stacked against people of color. The relationship between ICE and law enforcement would also make young people more vulnerable to the things that are wrong in our criminal justice system. And it would take time and energy away from other priorities in the community that the police could deal with. That's why we need Massachusetts to pass today. We need legislators to pass the Safe Communities Act so immigrants can be safe wherever they are. And it is in that vein that I call up Reverend Florissant from the Haitian Americans United and True Life Center. Let's welcome him as he comes.
Thank you so very much. Good morning.
Good morning.
Bonjour. All right. Thank you so much. I want to thank the co-sponsors of this important bill called the Safe Communities Act. I'm a member of the Haitian American United, as you heard, a member of the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, and also a member of the Haitian Pastors Association. I serve as a liaison for all those organizations in the coalition. And I stand before you as an immigrant, as a pastor and a community leader. And I've definitely received testimonies on a daily basis, basically. Families calling me that they have been abused, but they are afraid to come forward. To put this into perspective, I work also with the Haitian Women Association, a 30-year-old organization that advocates for domestic violence prevention. They shared with me for the past year, they had noticed at least 60% of calls coming up, not from the victims, but coming up from neighbors, and also more really frightening situations from children. children who are calling and requesting help and assistance for their parents that's being abused because their parents are too afraid to call on the police or to report, to come forward physically to report those crimes. So we definitely need that the Commonwealth stand together in unison with all of you, and then basically just to defend the rights of all immigrants. It's a moral duty for the Commonwealth to pass the Safe Communities Act to protecting immigrant rights and to making sure that the Commonwealth is safe for all immigrants. Thank you so very much.
It was Dr. King that said we're all tied in the garment of the inescapable garment of mutuality, and what affects one directly affects us all indirectly. And Dr. King went on to say that I cannot be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And then he essentially said that it's only then that I can be the best that I can be when you are the best that you can be. And right now, our immigrant brothers and sisters don't feel safe. And we want to ensure that they feel safe by passing the Safe Communities Act. So I want to call up Carol Rose, who's our next guest, or our next speaker rather, the Executive Director of the ACLU of Massachusetts. So let's welcome her as she comes. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here, particularly our friends from the Fourth Estate. We love you guys. And thank you, Rep. Balzer, Miranda, and Senator Eldridge for your leadership on the Safe Communities Act and for your deep commitment to civil rights and civil liberties. So I'm Carol Rose, the Executive Director of the ACLU of Massachusetts. And on behalf of the hundreds of thousands of ACLU supporters in the state of Massachusetts and nationwide, it's millions, I'm proud to stand in strong support of the Safe Communities Act. In 2020, standing up for the rights of immigrants is a moral imperative. It's clear immigration is the defining moral issue of the Trump presidency and of this period of time in history for all of us. Refugees are being sent back to violence. Thousands of children and their parents are being put in cages, often ICE cages. Families are being torn apart, forced into encampments on the Mexican-American border by our government. Meanwhile, Massachusetts lacks even the most basic protection against cruel enforcement of federal immigration laws. Schools share information with ICE on minor offenses, often resulting in deportation of children to dangerous countries that they've never known. Employers retaliate against workers who are seeking rightful compensation, and then ICE deports them with the help of local police. ICE prowls the state courthouses, snatching people at legal hearings and obstructing access to the justice system. Too many local law enforcement officials are deputized as federal immigration agents, and that makes our communities less safe. And the elected leaders of Massachusetts do in response, or what they fail to do, will define our place and their place in history. Silence can constitute complicity. Inaction can constitute acquiescence. Surely the Massachusetts legislature will not let another session pass with no action on this historically important human rights issue of our time. Massachusetts has long been a leader in defending liberty from the birth of this nation and equal rights and protecting the vulnerable. And now, more than ever, we must honor that history and pass the Safe Communities Act. I'd now like to introduce Marion Davis of the Mira Coalition, who will facilitate questions from the reporters. Thank you.
Thank you all. So as you know, the hearing is starting at 11, and a lot of us need to run down there very soon. So we can be as efficient as possible. That would be really great. If you have any questions, just raise your hand and I will try to call on you as soon as possible. No, yes.
Question for legislators.
Yes, legislators.
JR 10 Day coming up, formal's ending on the 31st. It's the fourth time this bill has been filed, at least on the Senate side. You know, a budget amendment failed last session. What's different?
Budget amendment passed.
It passed, but then budget negotiations reached consensus, right? So what's different about this session that you think you can get it through this bill?
I think more and more people across Massachusetts have been calling on their legislators to act on this. People have been coming to the State House and sharing their personal stories. There have been a series of briefings to educate the legislators. Victims of domestic violence have come and spoken, and then moved around the building and talked about what it means to them to be frightened of calling the police. Leaders from the business community have been up on Beacon Hill talking about the impact on our workforce. Healthcare providers have scattered around. So I think what's going on is the legislators have been more educated, and that's going to continue today. And I'm very optimistic that the personal stories that people are bringing to their legislators' attention is going to push us over the finish line this session.
Representative, do you feel you have enough to reach consensus and get this through to the House? Do you think
I think we're moving in that direction.
And if this gets out of committee, is the legislature going to make this a priority, considering some of the other big ticket items, such as the budget? There was a Senate climate proposal unveiled this week.
And I would just say, given the number of co-sponsors of the bill this session, more than ever, clearly that's sending a message both to Senate and House leadership that this is a priority. We've got a full year to pass this legislation, and look at the turnout just at this press conference. You're going to see an incredible number of stories, to Representative Balzer's point, downstairs in Gardner Auditorium about why this bill is so necessary.
is there any indication that this bill might get bipartisan support?
Right now, today is just the hearing on the bill, so that's what we're focused on, is hearing those stories, and then the committee will take action hopefully soon.
Rep. Balzer, what are you telling more moderate colleagues in the House why they should vote on this? Why, someone's on the bubble. What's your pitch to your colleagues?
So my experience of working in the House is that people are very moved by the personal experience of their constituents. And so when people hear from women who were victims of domestic violence and they were afraid to call the police because someone might ask a question about them or a member of family, I watch my colleagues being very moved by that. And I think it's not a matter of ideology so much as human contact and a wish to make sure that people feel safe in the communities. Also, many of our communities have adopted ordinances locally, welcoming ordinances. The courts have ruled in our favor recently. The district attorneys, some of the district attorneys have come forth. So it takes time, but we are building more and more of a consensus, and the House membership is very sensitive to that.
And I would just add, when you're thinking about elected officials, thinking about the political electoral consequences of the Safe Communities Act, it's critical to remember that last election cycle, 2018, the general election, there were a number of those elected officials who were opposed to the Safe Communities Act that were defeated. There were no pro-Safe Communities Act legislators that were defeated in a general election. So the public actually agrees. They agree that it's wrong to rip families apart. They agree that our federal immigration system is broken, and the state needs to step up to protect immigrants in Massachusetts.
Yes.